He was captured by the Nazis at age 15 and imprisoned in Auschwitz and Buchenwald concentration camps, where nearly all of his family members died. An internationally acclaimed writer and speaker, Dr. Wiesel is Andrew W. Mellon Professor in the Humanities at Boston University, the author of more than 30 books, including Night, Souls on Fire, and the recently published The Forgotten. Professor Wiesel has used his creative gifts, personal experience, and scholarly research to teach us how persecution and oppression arise from fanaticism and indifference. As a victim and survivor of hatred and prejudice, Professor Wiesel's message is an especially timely one for us today as we consider news from Los Angeles, word of ethnic warfare in Central Europe, and the daily reports of oppression and violence around the world. In 1986, Professor Wiesel was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his commitment to people of all oppressed races and religions. We will note more of his remarkable achievements in the presentation of an honorary degree later in these ceremonies. Please now welcome distinguished writer, teacher, and crusader for human rights, Elie Wiesel.
President Cunningham, my fellow honorees, Professor Colbert, distinguished members of the faculty, graduating students and their parents and friends. This is a special day for you, for you have just attained a degree in your life which you will remember. 4 years have passed. You have made friends, you have met teachers, many have inspired you, maybe you have inspired them, and now it's time for you to say farewell to one another, farewell to this school, farewell to a past that will remain present. It is also a special day to me, not only because I have the honor of becoming now one of your fellow graduates, but because this is a moment of taking stock for you and me. You are asking yourselves, what have you learned? What will remain of that learning? How will it influence your lives? And I am asking myself, what happened to me since another 17th of May? May 17, 1944 was to me a dark day. That day, in the little town which was mine, a town that beyond the mountains and the oceans lived, flourished, and tried to await redemption in peace, that town became a source of suffering and agony. That day, a ghetto in my place began its liquidation. And people that I have known and loved, parents, friends, comrades, were taken away, destination unknown, going somewhere we didn't know where. That was May 17, 1944. And now, the boy that was then a student in a yeshiva, a religious school, believing in God, working for the future of humanity and his people, and one not being separated from the other, is standing now before you, trying to share with you some of his experiences, some of his dreams, maybe even of his pain, but also of his hope. What pained us most that day was not that the enemy took us away. What pained us was that our neighbors were looking on in a total indifference. They were our neighbors, some of them were our friends. We used to meet them day after day. And then when the hour had struck for the Jewish community to be dislocated, expelled from its own homes, so many people then were indifferent. There wasn't a person to open a door and say to a child, come in, we'll save you. There wasn't a family to say, please send us those of you who are sick, we will hide them, we will shelter them. There were some. We had a maid, a marvelous woman, profoundly Christian. And she, because she was already in her village, she smuggled herself into the ghetto. And she came to us and she said, please come with me. I have a shack in the mountains and you will stay with us. We didn't accept her invitation, but I remember her. I remember her with gratitude and with affection, because she was among the very few who dared doing that. Since then, the problem of indifference has haunted my life. Why are people indifferent? Don't people understand that indifference is probably the worst plague that exists in life? It is worse than despair. Despair is a beginning. Despair can inspire you to create great works of art, music, literature, philosophy, theology. Despair evokes compassion. But indifference is the end. There is nothing beyond. I used to say for many years that the opposite of love is not hate, but indifference. But that is true of everything else. The opposite of education is not ignorance, but indifference. The opposite of faith is not heresy, but indifference. The opposite of art, beauty, is not ugliness, but indifference to art, indifference to beauty. The opposite of life is not death, but indifference. And I was wondering, how come that people don't understand that? Is it because indifference also offers a person a shelter? When we see so much evil in the world, it is easier perhaps not to pay attention to it, since then you don't have to do anything. When we see the racism that is still plaguing our society, the frustration that you feel when you see on television the injustices that were exemplified in Los Angeles, you say to yourselves, what can you do? And therefore the next step may be indifference. It's easier not to know about it. However, I believe with all my heart, my young friends, that indifference is not the answer. Indifference is not even a component of an answer. When you see the looting, the killing in Los Angeles, you say to yourselves, it involves me. I must do something about it. And if you don't feel anything about it, then woe unto you and woe unto us, your teachers. That means we have not taught you well enough. After all, when you study Socrates, what is it if not a lesson against indifference? Socrates is not only remembered because he was Plato's teacher, not only because he accepted to die rather than renege his beliefs. Socrates is remembered because he had a choice at one point. He had a choice of exile and death, and he preferred death to exile. But my good friends, how many people today are forced into exile? What do we have to feel? What must we feel about people who are so unhappy in this world that they are determined to leave their home, their family, their neighbors, their friends, and come here to our country, for instance, from Haiti, from Salvador, from Pakistan, from what used to be the Soviet Union? Should we simply say, we cannot take you in, we are indifferent to their pain? Don't tell me you are too young to think about it. You are no longer in a position of not having to take responsibility. Beginning this day, you are responsible. Beginning this day, you are responsible for what is happening in Haiti, for what is happening in Africa, where people still starve of hunger. I cannot understand that, my friends. That today people should still die of hunger is to me something beyond any belief. I have seen hunger. I know what it is. And I know that hunger is a human sin. It's not nature's sin. Hunger in Africa or in Asia is our fault because we can help them. It's enough to take the food that restaurants are throwing out and send them to Africa or Asia, to Sudan, and save children and their mothers. The same is true of everything else. We are responsible. I have learned as a Jew that whatever happens to my people affects other people. And the other way around. Whatever happens to any people affects my people. Whatever happens to one community, for whatever reason, affects other communities. Today we live in a small village. The planet is so small. And don't ever think that you can live now in isolation and indifference and waiting for good things to happen unless you make them happen. Take the latest events in what used to be the Soviet Union. Great things happened. There used to be a communist empire, dictatorship, totalitarian regimes. They collapsed. And they collapsed from within. We had nothing to do with it. But I think about it, those of you who studied political affairs or government, I'm sure you must ask yourselves the question that I am asking. How come that our so-called intelligence agencies, why they are called intelligence, I don't know, but how come that the intelligence agencies knew nothing about what was coming? The CIA or the KGB or the Mossad in Israel, the Deuxième Bureau in France, nobody had any inkling of what was coming. Then what do we need them for? Why do we spend billions of dollars for intelligence agencies? Why not take at least 10% of their budget and establish more chairs in this university and give students more fellowships and build hospitals? Do something important, something useful, something human with those monies. But the fact is, it happened. And the question now is, what will happen now? What will replace communism? Hundreds and millions of people were inspired by communism. What will replace it? Nationalism? Religion? A religious nationalism? What happens in Yugoslavia? They got freedom. What are they doing with freedom? They are using it to kill one another. And what would happen if what used to be the Soviet Union would become its own version of Yugoslavia, a nuclear Yugoslavia? We were talking about it earlier with a fellow honoree who is an old friend of mine, Dr. Bernie Lawn, about it. The danger, the nuclear danger that's coming from those places. Now, it's easy not to think about it. Don't think about it. And then you'll live happy. Then you'll take care of your boyfriends and girlfriends and go to graduate school. But it doesn't work like that. It's there. And when it is there, it's there for you and for me. I believe indifference to be not only a sin, but a punishment. A sin that is already its own punishment. In our tradition, we know that God may be unfair, but never indifferent. Job, whom you may have studied, was angry at God because he accused God of being indifferent. But God is not indifferent. God is no stranger to his creation. God is God because he wanted us to learn the dangers of indifference. Whatever we do because we feel what you feel. We feel that some people are miserable and others are not, or at least they think they are not. And some people need us and others think they don't. But in truth, we all need one another. I had a marvelous friend, a man named Nikos Kazantzakis, the man who wrote Zorba. You saw the film if you didn't read the book. And whenever we met, I used to give him a story, usually a Hasidic story, and he used to give me a story. The last time we met, he told me something that he found in the Etruscan hieroglyphs. A marvelous, marvelous saying. He said, "It is not because two clouds meet that the spark is lit. Two clouds meet for the spark to be lit. There are no accidents. Everything is because it is meant to be. And if you are here today, it's because generations and generations of your forebears decided one day to leave other countries in Africa or Europe and seek a land of freedom. And here you are to justify their fate in you. That means not only were they not indifferent to their own fate, they were not indifferent to yours. But then what is education? What is life? What is friendship? What is love? What is beauty? What is joy? If not our own impulse, our own pulsation, our own protest against an indifferent society, exaltation. I wish you, all of you, that the curiosity that was yours for 4 years, that the eagerness to learn, that thirst for knowledge that were yours for 4 years, continue for many more to come. I congratulate you and wish you well.